soup with some homemade cinnamon rolls with a little bit of a vanilla glaze on them. So we're going to start off by dicing up our onions. We're going to have a lovely kind of almost like a French onion meets vegetable minestrone soup with some pork mini meatballs in it. So it's going to be a really rich and hearty, delicious soup um, for our little lunch today. And so we're going to start by kind of caramelizing up our onions. I've got 2 onions that are going to go in here for it. So we're going to start to get that caramelization, that first part up. And then we'll work on our meatballs so we can pop those in the oven because they're going to bake. We're going to have them baking at a lower temperature because our cinnamon rolls are going to be baking up at 325. So they'll be sharing the oven with them. But they'll be delicious, and we'll go back into our soup towards the end. But we'll get these started, and then we'll prep up our meatballs, and then we can get our cinnamon rolls in the oven as well. And then we'll finish up our soup and make our glaze, and we'll have a yummy, delicious lunch for another cold day. So get all of our little onion scraps out of the way. There we go. And kind of like a French onion soup, I'm going to do long stringy onions instead of my usual dice, which I do with a lot of soups. That way you got that nice kind of richness of them, and we're going to kind of caramelize them up.
Did you get any snow?
We did. We got between 3 to 4 inches of snow, but it was kind of spoiled by an inch of ice that we received like the very next day. So we've kind of been dealing with the devastation of ice around here. We were very fortunate to be some of the few people that still have power. And we lost a small tree and some branches, but for the most part, we were pretty unharmed by the ice storm, which was very lucky because so many people did not make it out as unscathed, I should say. My parents lost power, so they were with us, and they lost several trees in their neighborhood and in their yard. But they just got power back today, so that's fortunate. But there's a lot down out there. But we were very, very fortunate, especially with how cold it's been. We're going to add in a little bit of olive oil into our soup pot here.
And how was dinner last night?
Oh, it was wonderful. The beef bourguignon was just so delicious and nice and warm and toasty, and cherry crisp was wonderful. And I think we almost finished one whole sourdough loaf, and we have part of the other one. So we kind of just like everything was just delicious. And it was just like nice and warm and hearty, especially because last night it got down so cold. We're going to break up our onions here. And then we'll let these kind of caramelize up. Gonna make sure we get them kind of mixed apart. There we go. And now let's work on our little mini meatballs here. So we're gonna have about 2 pounds of ground pork because we're making a big batch. And I still have my parents here, so we're feeding kind of a larger crew. We're going to start, since I have 2 pounds of meat, we're going to start with 2 slices of soft bread, and we're going to soak them in enough cream to where it makes the bread soggy, to where it's a nice paste, but not dripping, to where it's completely soaked, to where it's in a puddle, but enough to form a good paste. It's going to be about 1 to 2 tablespoons of heavy cream per slice of bread. Now, if you're going to use milk or half and half, you're going to need to use a little bit less. Cream is a thicker, which means you need a little bit more to get to that. But you essentially want it where it's kind of like you start to hold it and it will fall apart. And then for our 2 pounds of meat, we're also going to use 2 eggs. And this is going to be for our panade, which is going to be our base that holds our meatball together. Grab that. And let me give my hands a quick rinse. And then we're going to add in our spices, and then we'll add in our ground pork for this. So for our spices, I'm going to use some Italian seasoning, about a teaspoon, some dried oregano. I'll take this off. We're going to use about a teaspoon of dried oregano. Some black pepper, about a half a teaspoon. Some onion powder. We're going to use around a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon and a half. And some garlic salt, about 2 teaspoons of garlic salt, 1 teaspoon per pound of meat. And then before we kind of work in our meat, we're going to take our paste here and we're going to just squeeze those herbs and that bread and egg, everything through our fingers to create our nice kind of paste. And this is going to be the binder for our meatballs. You just really want to use your fingers to break up those pieces of bread, especially your crust. That's why you want to use a soft piece of bread. You don't want to use like sourdough or crusty Italian because you really want to be able to break up that crust as much as possible. There we go. And then we're going to add in our pork. We'll mix that all together and we'll make up our meatballs. But let me give this a quick toss. There we go. The smell is wonderful. I just love the scent of onions cooking. Okay. Kind of get our meat in here and then we'll toss these scissors into the sink. So I have 2 pounds of ground pork. For this, you could also use a chicken or a ground turkey for this as you wanted. You could use, I'm going to use beef stock for this to give it a richer base for it. And you could use a beef meatball for it. I just find that the beef tends to be a slightly stronger flavor in the meatball, which isn't quite as mellow as pork or chicken or turkey. It just overpowers the the herbs a bit more. So we're gonna go in. We're gonna kind of mix this herby panade through our meat. And I'm using that same method of just squeezing it through my hands to make sure it all works together. There we go. And this is going to, again, be our binder. And it's going to leave us with a really moist and tender meatball, which is going to be wonderful. We're putting it in our soup, which, again, will keep it really moist and tender. But even if it wasn't going to go back into the soup, the panade really keeps a tender meatball. It prevents it from drying out, which a lot of times breadcrumbs does, which is why I really love using that method than the breadcrumb method. Okay. So give this a nice little squeeze through. And then we're going to shape up our little meatballs here and then we'll get them in the oven. We'll get our cinnamon rolls cooking up. We'll work on our rest of our soup. Okay. Now you can make these. I'm not gonna do them super small today because I've got a lot more meatballs to do since I'm doing typically double the amount I do for my lunchtime soup. But you can make them smaller if you want. They will shrink up a little bit because they are pork, which has a little bit more fat in them. But I'm gonna make just a bunch of little meatballs that we'll bake up and then we'll put them back in our soup. Go smaller if you want to. I wouldn't go super large because, again, this is going to be in our soup and you want to be able to, eat them with a spoon. Knowing that they're going to shrink to about, 80% of the size that they are. So they will get a little bit smaller. With turkey and chicken, you're not going to see as much shrinkage because there's a lot less fat in those meats. And we'll get these. And make sure when you're seasoning them up, make sure you season them up really well because when you put a meatball in a broth-based soup, the broth can mellow out your meatball a lot. So you want to make sure it's well seasoned so it doesn't make it too bland. So we used a good amount of spices in here so that it will have great flavor. as well. But we're going to have a really rich and wonderful broth for our soup. So that will also add a lot of great flavor to the meatballs. A lot of times I'll make similar meatballs like this with I'll make a mini meatball like in French onion soup. And then this soup has kind of plays on that, but I'm also making it kind of like a minestrone as well. So it's kind of like a mix between the two, but really hearty um, on there. Just kind of using some of the ingredients we have around our house on there. Especially, I was like, you know, had to go out and get all these ingredients out before like the winter storm hit. And, it was kind of slim pickings because everybody buys up everything in there. And you know what? Everyone like is like, oh, you really just need stuff to make it through the weekend. But that ice storm was so devastating and so many people lost power that it's just, I'm glad that we had enough to kind of get us through and that I don't really need to go out shopping until the end of the week because it's nice to be able to just kind of stay in and, you know, not have to worry about going out there with the weather, the ice. It's still really bad and slippery out there. There's still tree limbs falling. And, luckily today we're getting up to 34. So a lot of it's melting, which will relieve some of the stress on the branches and whatnot, which hopefully means that there will be no more, damage and stuff like that. But, you never know. Although I will say, even though it is, it's really pretty outside at least. The ice on everything, it looks nice and pretty. It like shimmers, especially now that it's melting. It has a nice little shimmer to it. Okay. Let me get these here.
Do you post your recipes anywhere?
We do upload our live videos to the link on our page, so you can always rewatch all of our videos and recreate our recipes from watching them. I try to make sure I go through every single step so that you can recreate them just from watching them. And then a couple times a month, we send out recipe cards for our members with some of our the favorites of the month for them. So should be getting out a batch of recipe cards soon. Here we go. One last meatball. I'm going to pop these apart. Since it's a big batch, I'm going to wash my hands up real quick. Give them a good scrub. And then let's give our onions a nice little stir. I think we'll have some good caramelization forming on them. Beautiful. Look at that nice golden brown, which is perfect. That's where we're going to get our rich flavor. Beautiful. Okay, let's get these in the oven, and then we'll actually probably add our cinnamon rolls in the oven here in just a few as well. But we'll get these going. I'm going to put these underneath in the bottom rack so they'll have a longer cook time. They're in 325, but you could also cook these. Typically, I'd probably do them at a 400 for about 10 minutes, but we're going to do 325 because we're going to pop in our cinnamon rolls, which I have proofing right here in the oven. So nothing special to do. These are a labor of love. They do take a hot minute to make. They are a yeast-based cinnamon roll. So you make the dough and it has to proof for about an hour. And then you're going to coat them with butter, brown sugar, and cinnamon. You roll them up, you cut them, and then you have to proof them again for another hour until they're nice and beautiful and puffy like this. And then you're going to bake these guys for about 20 minutes. I like to bake them for 15 minutes, and then I rotate the pan and another 5 minutes on the other side until they're lightly kissed. So I'll set my timer for 15, and then we'll rotate them around for it. And then we'll make a lovely frosting to brush over the top of them. But so good on there. It was one of those things where husband's like, I'm really hungry today. Please don't make this. And I'm like, you know what? I got everything. We can make cinnamon rolls. I definitely can make cinnamon rolls. I want cinnamon rolls today. I'm happy for cinnamon rolls. And as soon as they were said, everybody was like, we're having cinnamon rolls. So I was like, yeah, we can do that. They're one of those things where I was going to say they're not even that hard to make. They're just one of those things that just takes a long time to make because, with a yeast recipe, they have a lot of proofing time. So, but they're worth the wait. They're so delicious and tender and moist and just wonderful. Okay, let's get our soup going. Now look at our beautiful onions here. We've got this nice kind of caramelization forming that's going to have this nice bit of sweetness to the onions, which will add a really great flavor to our soup. We're going to add in some minced up garlic, our carrots, some mushrooms, and we'll let that start to simmer for our broth base. And then, of course, we'll add in our veggies and whatnot. Our meatballs, I should say, not our veggies.
And what type of soup is this?
This is, I haven't quite come up with a name yet, but my concept behind this soup is a hybrid between a French onion soup and almost like a minestrone soup in this sense, but no tomatoes in it, but it's going to have a rich kind of beef base with an onion kind of flavor with it. But we're going to use some beans in it. We'll have some noodles in it. We'll have carrots and some vegetables in it as well. And then we'll have kind of the meatballs in it. So you have some parts from both soups playing in it. But it will be really hearty and delicious. I love to just make up soups on the go. I think that's one of those things where soups can be anything that you have lying around. And so that's kind of my plan is here is just kind of creating that, and hopefully it will turn out delicious. I have a feeling it's going to. I'm using some more hearty vegetables with it, so that will play with those rich flavors of the French onion soup.
Do you know what you're making tonight for dinner?
I do not know what I'm making for dinner tonight yet. It is yet to be decided. Figuring it out still, one step at a time on there. Not sure. Okay, let me get a little bit of, I'm going to make a little kind of in the middle here. I'm going to add my garlic in and then a little drizzle of olive oil just to kind of toast it up. Just a little drizzle over that top of that garlic. Give it a little bit of extra. There we go. Just like a teaspoon, not much, but it will really allow that garlic to get a little bit of extra oil to kind of crisp it up. And then I've got some rainbow carrots here that we're going to peel up and dice up and add into our soup. So I've got white, purple, and orange. I got that white one's huge. These orange ones are tiny. So we'll get them cubed up in there. And those are kind of play on it. So I think just the flavors will really work well together. But it's kind of got components of both a minestrone and a French onion soup. And they're just going to be a very happy couple. There we go. And get these last little guys in there. And always, whenever you're using whole carrots, do peel them. This outer things, you might feel like it's a lot of waste, but this has got a really earthy, woody flavor to it, and the texture is not great. And it can really change the flavor of your soup and the texture of the carrot. So always peel it off for a nicer, better flavor in your soup. Now, if you're using like baby carrots, it's already been peeled and everything like that, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you're using the whole ones, definitely peel them. Okay, let's give our garlic a little stir. There we go. We'll mix our onions up in there now. Smells wonderful. And now we're going to finish up our carrots. We'll get our carrots in here. And then we're going to slice up our mushrooms. We'll add in our pasta and just to get our pasta a quick kind of toast up on it. Our broth, and then we'll add our spinach in towards the very, very end because, of course, spinach will wilt away to absolutely nothing. But I do love it in a soup. But it's more of the like, think of your spinach when you're adding it into your soup as like a garnishing herb. Add it at the very, very end, and it will keep its shape fairly well because it needs very little cooking time to get there. If you put it in too soon, it will be nothing.
Do you ever use kale for your soups?
I do. I love kale and even different greens like collard greens, mustard greens in there. Spinach is what I had in my fridge. So kale is typically when I'm making a lot of soups, I will use kale because it holds up well and it's great for it. But right now, kind of cooking through different things in my fridge. And I always say, I'm like, some people won't use spinach because it wilts, but I said spinach holds up, it's great, but just always add it at the very, very end, and it will keep its form well. It's just like when you add like your fresh herbs like parsley, green onions, you add those at the end to keep their fresh flavor because if you add them too soon, they lose their flavor. There we go. Now, before I add my carrots in, I'm going to add a little bit of Worcestershire sauce in here. This is going to give you that kind of nice French onion flavor, which we will deglaze the bottom of with those onions. It's going to give you a little bit of that tang, but it will be delicious. There we go. And now we'll add in our carrots. We'll let those saute for a quick second. We'll get our mushrooms sliced up here. We've got some baby bellas. And you could always use sliced ones. I do love to slice my own mushrooms because I can make them a little bit thinner and they also stay fresh longer in my fridge. So it just allows me to have fresher produce longer. And typically the whole ones are cheaper than the sliced. There we go. Get those up, and then I have some fresh herbs that we're gonna throw into the bottom of our soup as well. Some thyme, a little bit of rosemary, and then we'll add in our base, our liquid to our soup. And we'll let that simmer.
Jenny's got a good suggestion for the name of your soup. Minion soup, minestrone, and
Ooh,
onions.
I like that. Minion soup. I think I love that. I love it. This is now minion.
Stealing it.
It is. Trademark. Mine now. Because isn't that what minions are good at? Stealing. Okay.
Actually, they're pretty bad at it.
Actually, yeah, they really are, but they think they're really good at it. I mean, they did steal the jewel in that one movie. Okay, let's coat these and get these mushrooms going here. And then we'll prep up our herbs. We'll throw our herbs in. Get this turned up just a smidge. And we've got some fresh thyme. I'm going to throw in, well, we'll get our bay leaf in here. So we've got a good sized soup, so I'm going to actually put 2 bay leaves in. And then I've got some thyme and some rosemary. I'm not going too strong on it, just a little bit of each. There we go. I'm going to kind of pull off some of these little leaves, and then we'll mince them up so that they can really add a nice fragrant touch to our broth instead of just floating around. And then I'll kind of pull them off, try to get as much of the stick off as possible. Now, if you want to use dried herbs, that is great. Just use a little bit less. I'm probably going to have about a teaspoon of each of these on there. Use a little bit less. And if you have the dried rosemary, crush it. Will allow it to have less of that stick texture and it'll bring out that flavor a little bit more instead of having, I find with rosemary, while I do love it, the dried herb, I always feel like is like a little twig. But if you crush it with like a little mortar and pestle, it's much, you get more of that flavor, but less of that texture. There we go. Gonna add this in here. And then we're gonna add in some of our oregano and then black pepper. About a teaspoon of oregano. I find oregano is more of a mild spice than rosemary and thyme, so I can use a little bit more. Do about a half teaspoon of black pepper. There we go. Mix this around. There we go. Looking good.
And it's in a bright yellow pot.
Yes, it is. Oh, you're right. It is in a bright yellow pot. I just need to put on a little goggle right there. Boom. And I'm wearing a blue apron. See, guys, it just fits. It fits. It just fits. It was meant to be. My minion soup. See? Some things are meant to be. Okay, let's get our liquid in. Because I'm gonna be using more than one of this because this is making a big one. But I'm gonna start with about a cup. We're gonna scrape around off the bottom of our bowls, really bring up any of those herbs and the caramelized onion bits on the bottom, and really kind of incorporate it, mix it in, and then we'll add some more in. I'm probably gonna end up using 6 cups of liquid, but we're gonna start with 4 on here. Throw my mushroom that decided it needed to jump out on me. And then we'll add in a nice big heaping scoop of beef bouillon. There we go. So funny how using this is my big soup pot and that 4 cups makes like no amount of liquid in there. Might use even more. It makes no difference in there.
You have a question? Is that just water?
It is. We're going to add in some beef bouillon to season it up. But yes, this is just water for right now. You could use like a boxed beef broth, or if you made your own, that's even better. I love the beef bouillon, like the better than bouillon, which is like a little paste. Because I feel like I can add more of it in there to get more flavor than the liquid so that I don't have to have a really watered down base for it. So let's see. And add a little bit more. Knowing I've got spinach, beans, noodles, and meatballs going in here, I think I'm going to use 8 cups. That should be good. So 8 cups of liquid, which means I'm really going to need 2 heaping spoonfuls of bouillon because it's about 1 teaspoon per cup of water. And it'll be perfect time because I've got to rotate my cinnamon rolls here. This is like empty. Why do I keep something that's hardly anything in there? Okay. Good thing I always have backups. So we're going to do 2 heaping spoonfuls of our beef bouillon in here. So that's 1 and 2. And this is going to be the sweet or the saltiness factor of our base for it. So we'll have this. There we go. And we'll mix it in. Perfect.
I have a question. Is there a recipe for this, or is this just something you're throwing together off the cuff?
I'm just throwing it together off the cup. I'm kind of blending two soups together, like a French onion and parts of a minestrone, and I'm just making it own. It's called my minion soup on there, and it's going to be delicious. Let's get our cinnamon rolls flipped around. We can take a peek at our meatballs. Let's see. Ooh, our meatballs are just about done too. I'm going to rotate those as well. Here is our cinnamon rolls. We had them baking here for about 15 minutes. I'm going to rotate them, and then they need just about 5 more minutes left, but they are just about done. And I give them a nice little kiss here. You know what? These are done. So we'll grab those out. I'm going to set my timer. You should be ready in 5 minutes. We got our meatballs, which we can throw in our soup in a little bit. I like to add my meatballs towards the very end of the soup process. But as you can see, they always shrink up. You can see like a little bit of the fat and the natural juices in the liquid are like kind of contract out of the meatball, but they'll be wonderful and they'll be delicious in our soup. Let's get this nice little boil here. I'm gonna take a little quick taste, make sure I have enough bouillon in there. Perfect. I'm gonna add in a little bit of our pasta. Now, I always say with pasta, don't add too much pasta when you're adding it to your soup. You're gonna think that you need a lot more than you do. A little bit goes a long way because it really does go up. So I'm going to put in just about a handful here. And then maybe, I want about a half a cup max. There we go. And it seems like a little amount, but it's going to grow. And you're going to have more than enough in there when it's going through. So just don't add too much. I realize I'm going to add a little bit more because I doubled. This is my smaller soup. I add a bit more than that. There we go. That's about it. No more. Don't add any more. That is like, I think, my beginner mistakes when I first started making, like adding rice or pasta into my soups. I would add too much, and then it will grow and expand, and then you'll suck up all of your juices of your soup, and you'll have so much pasta in it that it looks kind of crazy on there. So once that comes to a boil, we'll add in our beans, and then we'll add in some of our spinach. But let's work on our glaze for our cinnamon rolls. So we're gonna make kind of a rich, not just like it's a rich vanilla frosting type glaze. So we're gonna use a little bit of butter. So we'll melt that up. And then it's a mixture of kind of cream, milk, vanilla, and melted butter. So since we're gonna make a good amount, I'm gonna start with about 2 tablespoons of melted butter. You don't need to go too crazy on the melted butter part because then it kind of messes with the consistency of it. You can always make, a lot of times I'll make a cream cheese frosting with it, but this is just a classic one that works really well with it. You don't need to have all of the, the bougie stuff on there for it. This is like that the old fashioned frosting. Now, I do love a good cream cheese frosting, but I'm like one of the few in my family that do. And I always say I have a big batch of cinnamon rolls, but I always make smaller batches of frosting so that I find frosting is really great one day, but the next day it's not so much. So just make a smaller batch and make it fresh the next day because it's really easy to whip up. Simple, we'll need our vanilla. We'll need some cream. We're going to need a little bit of milk. I grab that out. But let's get our butter melted first. Check on our soup here. Give it a nice little stir and a mix around. There we go. Perfect. And here it's starting to get a nice little boil up. So we can get our beans rinsed and add it in there while our butter is melting. So with your beans, I'm using a Great Northern bean, but you could put in like a kidney bean, like a regular one if you wanted to, which is more like typically found in a minestrone. I prefer the northern bean or a cannellini bean because they're a bit more mild in flavor. And so they're not as intense, but you could use either. Don't just dump your can of beans in your soup. You're going to want to rinse them first because that starchy beany water will ruin your broth, will ruin the base of your soup, and the kind of the texture of it. So give them a good rinse. And I always say, if you don't like beans, just skip them all together. We'll mix them in here. Add that in there. It looks like our butter's just about nice little melted here. Okay, I'm going to turn it off and we'll let that residual heat kind of go on there. Let's go check out our cinnamon rolls, see if they've got their light little kiss on the top. I think they are done. You'll know when they're done is when they've got this light golden brown touch. They've got a nice little firmness to them. Now, I will tell you this. Mine bake up perfectly every single time in my electric oven. When I bake these at my parents' house in their gas oven, I can never bake them. They do not bake up right. So this is something that everybody's oven bakes differently, but I will say in my electric one, they cook up wonderfully every single time. But look at how beautiful.
How far in advance do you decide what you're making for the day?
You know what? Not far in advance at all. The soup came together like 30 minutes before we got on here. I figured it out. The cinnamon rolls came together about 2 hours before when everybody voted that we were having cinnamon rolls. So that is about as advanced as they go. I am a person who doesn't really meal plan. I grocery shop. I buy what's on sale, what looks good. And then I kind of cook what I feel like every day, and knowing that if I buy fish or something like that, that's got to be cooked earlier in the week. Versus certain other ingredients that can wait a little bit longer. But yeah, I buy lots of staples and then I make stuff from the staples. I have a bunch of different spices, and you can make so many different things with just basic staples. And that's, I think, the beauty of learning how to cook is you're not stuck on simple basic recipes. You can make so many different things with your staples. Like this recipe here, pork, but I could have done, I had lo mein noodles, so I could have done like a lo mein with the pork, meatballs. I could have done, so many different, a meatloaf, or it's just like lots of different things that you could do, which are all delicious. But I wanted a soup today. My husband's like, what? We could have had pork lo mein. And I'm like, we could have. But no. Let's add in a little splash of vanilla. Or about a teaspoon of vanilla extract, which is about around 2 capfuls. I'm going to add in a little bit of my powdered sugar to start with, kind of mix it, and then we're going to add in a little bit of cream. And I've kind of just mixed my ingredients together to form it, but we'll add in about 2 or so tablespoons of heavy cream. Match the 2 tablespoons of butter, so it's kind of equal parts butter and equal parts heavy cream. We're going to whisk that, and then we'll add in our powdered sugar, and then I'll add in some milk to thin it out, because otherwise it will be a very thick frosting and the milk will make it a little bit thinner on here. And this will go on our cinnamon rolls, which will be just a classic vanilla frosting, which will be amazing. I'm going to turn my soup down just a little bit because it's got a nice, lovely simmer going. Let me add in about, you don't need a lot of milk. So I'm going to do about a tablespoon, because a little bit of liquid goes a long way in thinning out powdered sugar. So don't put in too much, because then you're going to be adding in so much more powdered sugar. Now with this, I'm going for a frosting-like texture versus a glaze that you drizzle over. So it's gonna be thicker than, say, what I do on my scones. So we'll whisk it. Now this is gonna have a richer flavor than my, a lot of my glazes because the butter in it makes it a little bit richer than, but it's not like a true buttercream. It's lighter than a buttercream, which is nice because it's not as heavy. And you already have, cinnamon rolls are already nice and sweet, so it's nicer. Of course, I'm making a big mess too, but that's me as well. So good. We're getting there, and just a little bit more. And then we're going to put our meatballs in our soup, and then we'll add in our spinach to our soup. And our soup should be just about done because those noodles don't take very long to cook up into our soup. Here we go. We're just about there. There we go. Perfect. So you want you see how it's nice and thick? And as it sits, it's actually going to thicken up a little bit more on there because that butter will cool. So don't make it so thick that you can't spread it on there.
Is there a food you enjoy that you haven't learned to make yet? There's one, sushi.
Sushi. There is a food that I was going to say. I do love sushi, and I have attempted to make sushi before, and it's never been very successful. Part of it is you've got a lot of specialty ingredients on there, and it's hard. Uh, Sushi is one of those things that you have to be really highly trained for. And it's like something that it takes like a lot of chefs like 10 years to even become like a base level really good at it. That is one thing that I really wish I would love to learn how to actually do and be good at. But I don't know if I would want to. I would probably have to make my children and everybody eat sushi like every single day. And I don't know if they would love that every single day. We're going to put our meatballs in. And part of it is it's like maybe if it was our eel and avocado roll. So an eel and avocado roll is my absolute favorite sushi, and I just love it. And that was if I could make that one every day, we'd be very very happy. But I got to find eel. It's not something you can just get at your local grocery store. So here are our seasoned pork meatballs. We season them with oregano, Italian spices, garlic, salt, onion powder, black pepper. And we made a lovely panade using cream, egg, and bread for our base of our meatball. And then we baked them up in the oven at 325 right underneath our cinnamon rolls. We're adding them into our soup here. We'll give them a nice toss. Look at that. Beautiful. And you can see as we stir, like those little noodles are popping up. And that's why you don't want to put too many noodles in there because you want noodles in every bite, but you don't want it to turn into a pasta dish. There we go. And I'm going to take one more taste, make sure I don't need to add any more spices before we add in our spinach. I think I want to add a little bit more pepper. And a little bit more Worcestershire. That gives it a little bit of a tang that you get in the French onion soup. Not much, but a little bit. Okay. Perfect. That was the missing, that tang. Okay, let's add in our spinach. And I always say do this at the very, very end because this will wilt down to nothing. We're just going to plop it all on here. Kind of tuck it under. And you could also do kale for this as well. And just dip it underneath, let it wilt in there. Beautiful. And then you know what I think I'm going to do for one last little bit to improve the beauty of my broth. My little secret ingredient adds a little bit of flavor, but it actually makes a beef broth so pretty. A little bit of kitchen bouquet. I love this stuff. And I use it in a lot of beef broth bases. A little teaspoon or so, and it's going to turn it into a richer, darker brown color, nice kind of amber color, which will give it a nice, it's made from roasted vegetables, but it makes it just a little bit nicer in flavor and color. There we go. Look at that. Beautiful. Our soup is done. Let's frost up some of these cinnamon rolls. I don't frost all of them. I only frost some of them. That way, some of my family does not like them with the frosting on them. Let me grab an actual spatula because I'm not going to frost with a whisk. But look at these gorgeous ones. I'm going to frost my funny ones first. That way they get eaten. Where? Let me find. There we go. This is a good frosting spatula. So we're going to just dab them on. And they're nice and warm. So this frosting should just melt right into those kind of nice, beautiful swirls on here. And this is our homemade cinnamon rolls. We made them with a nice, lovely yeast dough. We had an hour proof on the first part of it. Then we filled them up with cinnamon, butter, and brown sugar. That's what they're swirled with. Rolled them up nice and tight. Cut them into their nice little shape. Proof them again for another hour until they've kind of puffed up and filled them up. And then we bake them at 325 for 20 minutes until they've got this nice, lovely golden kiss on them. So we're frosting up half of them. And that way we've got half frosted and half for those who like to eat them with just butter on them. Delicious homemade cinnamon rolls. So let's serve up our lunch here. Okay. Let me get a ladle for our soup. And you know what? Let me grab a little bit of Parmesan cheese that we can put. Where did I put it? Yeah, never mind. Can't find it. I was going to say a little bit of Parmesan cheese would have gone perfectly, but let's see. Okay. For lunch today, we have our mignon soup, which is a hybrid between French onion soup and minestrone soup. We have a rich beef broth with our caramelized onions, mini pork meatballs. We have sauteed mushrooms, onions, carrots, some great northern beans, spinach, and again, just a lovely broth to top it off with one more meatball. And then we are going to serve it with a delicious, soft cinnamon roll for dessert. And it looks like Jack is ready for some cinnamon rolls too, because it sounds like he just woke up as well. But these are amazing. Just look how soft and wonderful they are. And they're going to be so delicious. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day so I can kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made, our mignon soup and our homemade cinnamon rolls, and you can always watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in there. So we have our Dutch ovens, our bakeware, knives, cutting boards, all the different things we use in the kitchen for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.